In the cold and silent stretch of space far beyond Neptune, where sunlight is only a faint memory, something strange drifted. It was not a comet, not an asteroid, and certainly not a human-made satellite. It was a ship, but unlike any ever seen before. Its shape was smooth and curved, like a teardrop made of dark metal that seemed to drink the starlight instead of reflecting it. There were no lights, no radio signals, no signs of life. Just silence. Scientists on Earth first noticed it by accident. A deep space telescope, built to study distant galaxies, caught a flicker in the Kuiper Belt, a region filled with icy rocks and dwarf planets at the edge of our solar system. At first they thought it was a glitch, but when other observatories confirmed the object, the world's space agencies took notice. They gave it a name, Object K7. For weeks, astronomers tracked K7 as it floated slowly through the void. It showed no signs of propulsion, no exhaust, no heat trails, nothing. Yet it was clearly not natural. Its surface was too perfect, too symmetrical. It had been damaged. Long gashes ran along its side, and parts of its hull were blackened as if scorched by fire. But there was no debris around it, no wreckage. Just the ship alone, drifting like a ghost. People on Earth began to wonder. Was it a probe from another star? A message in a bottle from a distant civilization? Or something more dangerous? Governments held secret meetings. Military leaders warned of possible threats. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was a government hoax. But the scientists who studied it felt something deeper, a quiet awe mixed with fear. This was not from Earth, this was from somewhere else, somewhere far away. Then, without warning, everything changed. One morning, 3 new objects appeared on radar screens. They came out of nowhere, literally. One moment, space was empty. The next, 3 sleek, sharp-edged ships hung in the darkness around K7, forming a perfect triangle. They moved with unnatural precision, gliding without sound or exhaust. Their surfaces shimmered like oil on water, shifting colors in ways that hurt the eyes. These were not peaceful visitors. They looked like predators. Experts called them hunter ships. The name stuck. The hunters did not communicate. They did not broadcast signals. They simply surrounded K7 and held position as if waiting. Or watching. Earth's deep space monitoring stations went into emergency mode. Every telescope, every satellite, every listening device was pointed at the scene. The world held its breath. Inside mission control centers from Houston to Beijing, analysts worked around the clock. They studied every pixel of the images, every whisper of data. The hunters showed no weapons, at least none that humans could recognize, but their posture was aggressive. They kept K7 trapped in the center of their formation, never letting it drift more than a few kilometers away. If K7 tried to move, the hunters adjusted instantly, like wolves circling wounded prey. No one knew what was inside K7. Was it empty? Was someone or something still alive in there? And why were the hunters so intent on keeping it contained? Back on Earth, panic began to spread. News channels ran non-stop coverage. Social media exploded with theories. Some said the hunters were here to invade. Others believed K7 carried a disease or a weapon. A few quiet voices suggested it might be a refugee, someone running from danger. But without proof, fear won out. Governments argued over what to do. Should they send a ship to investigate? Should they prepare for war? The United Nations called an emergency session, but no agreement could be reached. Meanwhile, the standoff in deep space continued, silent and tense. Only one person refused to wait. His name was Elias Vance. He wasn't a soldier or a politician. He was a pilot, once respected, now mostly forgotten. Years ago, he had worked for a private space salvage company, recovering old satellites and broken rockets from orbit. But after a failed mission left 2 crew members dead, he was blamed, fired, and quietly disappeared from the public eye. Now he lived alone on a remote island, fixing boats and watching the stars. But when he saw the images of K7 and the hunters on the news, something inside him stirred. He recognized the damage on K7's hull, not from weapons but from a failed jump through folded space, a technique humans were only beginning to understand. And the way the ship drifted, it wasn't random. It was following a path, however faint, toward the inner solar system, toward Earth. To Vance, it looked like a cry for help. While the world debated, he made a decision. In a hidden hangar on the island, he kept his old ship, the Wayfarer, a small, rugged tug designed for deep space towing. It wasn't fast and it wasn't armed, but it was tough, and it was his. He spent 3 sleepless nights repairing systems, loading supplies, and bypassing Earth's orbital traffic controls. No one would give him permission to go out there, so he wouldn't ask. On the 4th night, under cover of a massive solar flare that blinded most tracking systems, he launched. The Wayfarer shot into the sky, leaving Earth's atmosphere behind. Inside the cockpit, Vance felt calm for the first time in years. He wasn't going to fight. He wasn't even sure he'd survive. But he had to know what was on that ship. And if someone was still alive in there, maybe he could help. Back on Earth, no one noticed his departure at first. By the time they did, he was already halfway to Mars. Meanwhile, in the Kuiper Belt, the hunters remained still. But sensors picked up a tiny new signal, a human-made vessel moving fast, heading straight for the standoff. The hunters shifted. Just slightly. Their formation tightened. Their surfaces darkened. They had noticed. Inside K7, deep in its damaged core, a single being stirred. It had been waiting, watching, listening. It had sent out a weak distress pulse days ago, aimed at Earth. Not with words, but with patterns, memories, and a fragment of shared history. It didn't know if anyone would understand, but it had to try. Now, as the Wayfarer drew closer and the hunters grew tense, the being made a choice. It activated the last of its power. A soft blue light flickered to life inside the alien ship, visible only to those who knew where to look. On Earth, a junior analyst in a quiet monitoring station blinked at her screen. "That's new," she whispered. She zoomed in. The light wasn't random. It pulsed in a rhythm, a pattern, and within that pattern was something familiar, something human. She called her supervisor, heart pounding. "Sir, I think it's trying to talk to us." But it was too late for messages. The human was already on his way, and the hunters knew it. Inside the broken alien ship, deep in the cold dark of space, one being was still alive. Its name was Theta. It was not like humans. It had a hard outer shell like an insect, but larger, about the size of a man. Its eyes were made of many small lenses, and they glowed faintly in the dark. Its limbs were thin and jointed, moving with quiet grace even when weak. Theta was not a soldier. It was a scholar, a keeper of stories, a speaker of many tongues, a traveler of stars. Theta came from a place very far away, from a group of worlds that once lived in peace. But that peace was gone now. A cruel force had risen, called the Hunters. They believed only the strong should live. They destroyed anyone they saw as weak or different. Theta's people had tried to fight, but they were not warriors. They were thinkers, healers, builders. One by one, their worlds fell. Theta had escaped in a small science vessel, carrying something more valuable than weapons: knowledge. Hidden in its ship were records, images, sounds, genetic codes from a time long ago, when Theta's people had visited Earth, not to conquer, but to help. They had shared gifts with early humans, seeds that grew in poor soil, light that healed wounds, songs that calmed the mind. But over time, humans forgot. Wars came, memories faded. The connection was lost. Now Theta was the last one who remembered. The ship had been damaged during a jump through folded space, a way of traveling faster than light. Something went wrong. The engines failed. The hull cracked. Theta barely survived. It sent out a weak signal, hoping someone would hear. Not just anyone, humans. Because deep in its heart, Theta believed humans might still remember, even if they did not know it. But before help could come, the Hunters found it. Now, Theta floated in the dim control room of its dying ship. Air was running low. Power flickered. Outside the window, the 3 hunter ships hung like shadows, unmoving, waiting. Theta knew what they wanted. They wanted to erase the past, to make sure no one ever knew the truth, that kindness once crossed the stars. Theta's body was weak. Its limbs trembled, but its mind was sharp. It opened a hidden panel in the floor and pulled out a small glowing crystal. Inside that crystal was everything, the full archive of its people's history with Earth. It also held a piece of Theta's own life code, and something else, a match to human DNA. Proof that long ago, the 2 species had shared more than just friendship. They had shared life itself. Theta placed the crystal into the ship's last working transmitter. It began to send the data, not in words but in patterns of light and sound that any smart species might understand. It aimed the signal at Earth. It did not know if humans would listen. But it had to try. Back on Earth, people were scared. Governments argued. Scientists watched the screens, hearts pounding. No one knew what to do. But one man was already on his way. Elias Vance flew the Wayfarer through the silent black. He had no weapons, no backup. Just his ship, his wits, and a feeling deep in his gut that this was right. He had studied the images of K7 for hours. The damage looked familiar, not from war, but from a failed jump. He had seen something like it once, years ago, during a secret military test that went wrong. That ship had been trying to fold space just like this one. As he got closer, he saw the hunters for the first time with his own eyes. They were terrifying, sharp, fast, and full of purpose. But they did not attack him. Not yet, they watched. That gave him hope. Maybe they were waiting for orders. Maybe they did not see him as a threat, just a small, lonely ship. He slowed the Wayfarer and matched speed with K7. Then carefully, he extended the docking arm. It took 3 tries. The alien ship's port was strange, not made for human tools. But Vance had spent years fixing broken things in space. He knew how to improvise. With a soft clang, the 2 ships connected. Air hissed as pressure equalized. Vance put on his old spacesuit, patched in 3 places, but still safe. He took a deep breath and opened the hatch. Inside, the air was thin and cold. The walls glowed with a soft blue light, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Strange symbols covered the surfaces, shifting as he moved. It felt alive, not like a machine, but like a home. Then he saw Theta. It was curled in a corner, barely moving. Its shell was cracked. One of its arms hung limp. But its eyes opened when Vance entered. They did not show fear. They showed relief. Vance raised his hand slowly, palms out, the oldest sign of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, even though he knew Theta wouldn't understand the words. But Theta did understand. Not the words, but the meaning. It made a soft clicking sound like stones tapping together. Then it pointed a thin finger toward the center of the room, where the glowing crystal sat on a pedestal. Vance moved closer. He had seen alien tech before, mostly broken pieces from old satellites, but this was different. It felt warm. It hummed gently. And as he looked at it, images began to form in his mind. Not on a screen. In his thoughts, he saw forests on Earth green and wild. He saw humans with painted faces dancing under the stars. He saw Theta's people, tall, gentle beings giving them seeds, showing them how to heal with light. He saw children laughing, sharing food, learning songs from the stars. Then he saw the truth. The humans in those memories had something in their blood, a tiny mark, a thread of alien life. It was dormant now, hidden for thousands of years. But it was there. In all of them, Vance gasped. He stumbled back, heart racing. This wasn't just history. This was family. Theta watched him, eyes bright. It knew he understood. Outside, the hunters shifted. One of them turned slightly, its dark surface reflecting the distant sun. It had sensed the data transfer. It knew Theta had sent the truth to Earth. Time was running out. Theta made a weak gesture toward the escape pod, a small egg-shaped craft attached to the side of the ship. It pointed at Vance, then at the pod, then at Earth. "Go," it seemed to say. "Take this, save it." Vance shook his head. "I'm not leaving you." But Theta tapped its own chest, then pointed to the crystal. The message was clear. The knowledge was more important than one life. Even its own. Vance looked at the pod. It was small, but it could carry 1 passenger and the crystal. He could get it to safety. But that meant leaving Theta behind. Just then, a warning light flashed on his suit. The hunters were powering up. Energy readings spiked. They were going to destroy the ship and everything in it. Theta made a sound like a sigh. Then it did something unexpected. It placed a hand on Vance's helmet. A soft warmth spread through the glass. For a moment, Vance felt calm, strong, ready. He knew what he had to do. He picked up the crystal. It fit perfectly in his gloved hand. Then he helped Theta into the escape pod. It was a tight fit, but Theta curled up, eyes closing in exhaustion. Vance sealed the pod and set the course for Mars, where Earth's newest space station waited. It would take hours, but it was the safest place. Then he turned and walked back into the main ship. He opened a panel on the wall and found the comm system. He didn't know how it worked, but Theta had shown him enough. He connected his own suit radio to the alien network. He took a deep breath. "This is Elias Vance," he said, his voice steady. I'm broadcasting from Object K7. There's someone here. And they're not our enemy. They're our past, our family. And if you're listening, don't let them die in silence. He sent the message on every frequency he could, military, civilian, emergency bands. He didn't know who would hear it, but someone had to. Outside, the hunters moved closer. Their weapons glowed red. Vance stepped out of the ship onto the hull of the Wayfarer. He stood in the void, small and alone, facing the three great ships. He had no weapons, no shield, just a human body, a beating heart, and a truth too big to hide. And then he waited. Elias Vance's body floated in the cold silence of space. His suit was still, his arms out like he was reaching for something far away. Around him the stars burned steady and bright. The hunters watched for a long moment. Then without a sound they turned and moved away, vanishing into the dark as quickly as they had come. No one knew why they left. Maybe they saw that killing one human would not erase the truth. Maybe they simply did not understand what they had just witnessed. But they were gone. On Earth, people did not cheer. They did not shout. They stood quiet. In cities and villages and space stations, millions watched the feed showing Vance's still form. Many cried. Others held hands. Children asked why the man didn't come back. Parents tried to explain bravery, but their voices broke. Vance had not died in battle. He had died standing, and that made all the difference. Theta's escape pod was safe now, nestled inside the Mars orbital station. Doctors and scientists worked fast. Theta's body was weak, its shell cracked, its breathing shallow, but it was alive. They placed it in a special chamber filled with warm, misty air that smelled like rain and stone, something Theta's people once knew. Slowly, its eyes opened again. The first thing it saw was a human face. Gentle, tired, kind. A woman in a white coat smiled. "Welcome," she said softly. Theta made a soft clicking sound. It was not a word, but it meant thank you. News of Theta's survival spread fast. Earth was still shaken, but something had changed. Fear had not won. Compassion had. And now people wanted to know more. Governments that once argued now worked together. Scientists from every country shared data. Engineers built new tools to help Theta heal. Artists painted pictures of Vance standing in space. Schools taught children about the old connection between humans and the stars. For the first time, Earth felt like one people, but not everyone was happy. Deep in hidden bunkers, some leaders still whispered about danger. "What if this is a trick?" one general asked. "What if they're studying us to attack later?" But even he could not ignore the proof in the DNA. The tiny glowing thread was real. Tests were run again and again. Every human, man, woman, child, from every corner of the planet, carried that same mark. It was not a weapon. It was a gift left long ago and almost forgotten. Theta began to recover. It learned to speak simple English, not with its mouth, but through a small device that turned its thoughts into sound. Its voice was soft, like wind through leaves. One day, a young scientist named Mira sat with Theta in the healing chamber. She held a small plant in her hands, a seed that had been found in ancient ruins in Turkey long thought to be extinct. But when they placed it near Theta, the plant began to grow. Green leaves unfurled in minutes. How? Mira asked, eyes wide. Theta touched the plant gently. "Your ancestors grew this with our help," it said. "It remembers," Mira cried. Not from sadness, but from joy. The past was not dead. It was sleeping, and now it was waking up. Back on Earth, people started to change the way they lived. They planted gardens using old seeds found in museums. They sang songs that sounded like the ones in Theta's memories. They looked at strangers not as enemies, but as family, because in a way they were. But the biggest change came in space. A new mission was planned. Not to explore, not to conquer, but to protect. Ships from every nation joined together to form the Earth Shield, a peaceful fleet that would guard the solar system, not with weapons, but with presence. Their job was simple. If another lost traveler came, Earth would be ready to help. And they named their first ship the Elias Vance. Months passed. Theta grew stronger. It walked the halls of the station, its steps light, its eyes full of wonder. It saw humans laughing, working, sharing food. It saw children drawing pictures of stars and strange, kind beings. It felt hope again. Then came the day when Theta asked to speak to the whole world. They set up a broadcast. Not from a government building, not from a military base, but from the Mars station with Earth rising in the window behind Theta. Millions watched. Theta stood tall. Its voice was calm. Long ago, my people came to your world, it began. We did not bring weapons. We brought seeds. We did not bring orders. We brought songs. We saw your kindness even when you were young and afraid, and we loved you for it, it paused. We thought you forgot us, but you did not. You just needed to remember. Then Theta held up a small object, a seed, glowing faintly blue. This is a gift from my home. It grows food that never spoils, water that never runs dry, and light that heals wounds. We offer it to you, not as payment, but as friendship. People on Earth held their breath. Theta looked into the camera, its many eyes shining. You stood for me when I had no one. Now I stand with you, not as alien, not as stranger, but as family. The broadcast ended. For a long moment there was silence. Then all over Earth people began to clap. Not in stadiums or halls, but in homes and streets and fields. A quiet, steady sound of thanks. That night more people looked up at the stars than ever before. Not with fear, but with love. And far away, in the cold dark between stars, the hunters watched from a distance. They did not attack. They did not speak. But they saw what Earth had become. And for the first time, their rigid logic faced something it could not destroy. Unity. Theta stayed on Mars for a long time. It taught humans old ways, how to heal with light, how to grow food in dry places, how to listen to the silence between stars. In return, humans taught Theta about music, about stories, about forgiveness. And every evening, someone would point to a quiet spot in the sky and say, "That's where he is." Watching over us, they meant Elias Vance. His body was never brought back to Earth, by choice. The leaders agreed, let him stay among the stars. A small memorial was built on the moon, a simple stone with his name and the words, "He stood so we could remember." Years later, when the first joint human-alien ship was ready to fly, not to war, but to Theta's broken homeworld to help rebuild, its crew stood before the memorial and placed a hand on the stone. "We go in peace," they said. And somewhere in the endless dark, a man who once felt like nobody smiled, knowing he had helped make everyone somebody. Years passed. The world did not forget. Elias Vance's name became more than a memory. It became a promise. Children learned about him in school, not as a hero with weapons, but as a man who stood alone so others would not be alone. Statues of him were built in cities, but they did not show him fighting. They showed him with his arms open, looking up at the stars. Theta stayed on Earth, not as a guest, but as a teacher, a friend, and, in time, a citizen. It lived in a quiet home near the sea, where the sound of waves reminded it of its own world's oceans. Every morning it walked along the shore, watching the sun rise. Humans often joined it, not to ask questions, but just to walk in silence. That, Theta said, was the deepest kind of talking. The gift Theta brought, the glowing seed, changed life on Earth. Farms grew food that needed little water. Hospitals used light from the seed to heal wounds without cuts or medicine. In dry lands, clean water bubbled from the ground where the seed was planted. No one owned it. No government locked it away. It was shared, just as it had been long ago. People began to live differently. They argued less. They helped more. They looked at strangers and saw not enemies, but cousins from a story older than nations. The old borders did not disappear overnight, but something new grew between them. Trust, and in space, something even greater happened. The ships that once carried weapons now carried builders, doctors, and teachers. The Earth Shield became the Earth Bridge. Its mission was simple. If anyone in the dark needed help, Earth would answer. Then came the day when Theta said it was time to go home. Its world was not gone, only broken. The hunters had left it empty, its cities in ruins, its forests silent. But life still clung to the soil. And if someone returned with hope, maybe it could grow again. Humans did not hesitate. They built a new ship, not fast, not flashy, but strong and kind. It was made from parts donated by every country. Its walls held art from children, messages from elders, and a small garden grown from Theta's seed. They named it the Rememberer. The crew was small, 6 humans and Theta. Among them was Mira, the young scientist who had first held the growing plant. Now she was a botanist, a healer, and Theta's closest friend. There was also Captain Lena Cho, the woman who had steered the Bright Star into danger to protect Theta's pod. She was older now, her hair gray but her eyes still sharp with courage. Before they left, the whole world watched. Not with fear, but with pride. On the launch day, millions stood outside looking up. In schools, in hospitals, in villages without electricity, people held hands and whispered, "Go in peace." The Rememberer rose slowly into the sky, leaving a trail of silver light. As it passed the moon, it flew near the memorial stone where Elias Vance's name was carved. Theta placed a hand on the ship's window. "Thank you, friend," it said softly. The journey would take many months. But they were not afraid. They carried more than supplies. They carried a new way of being. Back on Earth, life went on but changed. Cities planted gardens where anyone could take food. Laws were rewritten to protect not just people, but all living things. Children learned many languages, not just human ones, but the sounds of whales, the songs of birds, and the quiet hum of plants. They were taught that life speaks in many ways, and listening is the first act of love. And every year, on the day Vance stood in space, Earth held a moment of silence. Not to mourn, but to remember. In that silence, people thought of kindness. They thought of standing up for others. They thought of stars, and the truth that we are never truly alone. Out in deep space, the Rememberer traveled farther than any human ship had gone before. Theta showed them how to read the stars not just as points of light, but as stories. "That one," it would say, pointing, "is where my grandmother watched her first sunrise. That one is where we sang our last song before the hunters came." The crew listened. They learned. And they shared their own stories too. Of oceans, of mountains, of a man named Elias who changed everything by doing one small, brave thing. When they finally reached Theta's homeworld, they found ruins, but also life. Tiny flowers grew between broken stones. Birds with silver wings nested in empty towers. The air was thin but clean. They did not bring machines to rebuild. They brought hands. For weeks they worked, humans and Theta together, clearing rubble, planting seeds, singing old songs into the wind. At night they sat around a fire made of safe, glowing light, and told stories of Earth and stars and friendship. One evening, Mira found Theta standing on a hill looking at the sky. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked, meaning the hunters. Theta was quiet for a long time. Then it said, "Maybe, but if they do, they will not find fear. They will find people who remember how to care." Mira nodded. That was enough. Years later, the Rememberer returned to Earth. It did not come alone. Behind it flew 3 small ships, built by Theta's people who had begun to return, drawn by the news that their world was healing. Earth welcomed them not with armies, but with open arms. The first alien child to set foot on Earth ran straight to a garden and picked a tomato. It laughed, a sound like bells, and took a bite. "It tastes like home," it said. And in that moment everyone understood. Home is not just a place. It is a choice. The choice to protect, to share, to stand for others, even when you stand alone. Long after, when old people told the story to grandchildren, they always ended the same way. "Once, we were afraid of the dark. Then a man stood in it and showed us the light." And somewhere in the endless sky, Elias Vance floated still, not as a ghost, but as a reminder that one person can change everything, and that kindness, sent out into the universe, always finds its way home. Elias Vance stood on the outer hull of his small ship, the Wayfarer, floating in the endless black. Around him, the 3 hunter ships loomed like blades made of night. They did not speak. They did not move fast. But their stillness was worse. It was the quiet before a storm. His message had gone out. He didn't know if anyone heard it, but he hoped they did. He held the glowing crystal tightly in one hand. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Inside it was the truth. About Theta, about Earth's forgotten past, about the tiny thread of alien life hidden in human blood. The hunters knew something had changed. Their sensors had picked up the data burst. They saw the escape pod launch heading toward Mars. And now, a lone human stood in front of them, unprotected, broadcasting to the whole solar system. To the hunters, this made no sense. Why would one small being risk everything for another? Why show yourself when you could hide? Their minds worked on logic, on strength, on control. Compassion was a flaw. Mercy was weakness. But this human, he did not act like prey. He acted like a shield. One of the hunter ships turned slowly. A dark panel slid open on its side. Inside, energy began to gather, a red, angry light growing brighter by the second. It was a weapon, and it was aimed at the escape pod carrying Theta. Vance saw it. His heart pounded, but he didn't move. He raised his arms not to fight but to block, as if his body alone could stop a beam of pure destruction. Then something unexpected happened. Deep inside the crystal, Theta's final gift activated. It wasn't just a memory bank. It was a bridge. And in that moment, it linked Vance's mind to Earth's global networks, not through wires, but through a burst of encoded light that traveled faster than any radio wave. Every screen on Earth lit up at once. In homes, in offices, in space stations, in military bunkers, people saw the same thing. Vance, standing alone in space with the hunters behind him. And then images began to flow. Not in words, but in feelings, pictures, sounds. They saw early humans, naked, cold, lost, being given warm cloaks woven from starlight threads. They saw alien hands teaching children how to plant seeds that grew in dry sand. They saw mothers singing lullabies in a language that sounded like wind through trees, and human babies smiling in response. Then came the proof, a simple animation showing human DNA, and inside it a tiny glowing strand that matched Theta's people. It wasn't a lot, just a whisper in the code, but it was enough. Enough to show that humans were not alone, that they had never been alone. The broadcast lasted only 30 seconds, but it changed everything. On Earth, people stopped arguing. Soldiers lowered their weapons. Scientists wept. Children asked, "Are we part alien?" And for the first time in history, the whole world felt the same thing. Wonder. But the hunters did not care about wonder. They saw only a threat. The red light in their weapon grew blinding. Vance knew he had seconds left. He did the only thing he could think of. He held the crystal high and shouted into his radio, "They came to help us once. Now it's our turn." Then he did something no one expected. He jumped, not away, not to safety. He pushed off the hull of the Wayfarer and floated straight toward the nearest hunter ship. It was madness. But in that moment, he wasn't thinking like a pilot or a scientist. He was thinking like a human, flawed, brave, and full of heart. The hunter ship hesitated. Its weapon flickered. Why would a human fly toward death? It made no sense. Their systems froze for a split second, trying to understand. That was all the time Earth needed. From Mars orbit, a civilian cargo ship, the Bright Star, changed course. Its captain, a woman named Lena Cho, had heard Vance's message. She didn't wait for orders. She fired her engines and flew straight toward the escape pod, placing her ship between it and the hunters. Then another ship came, and another. Within minutes, a dozen civilian vessels, freighters, research tugs, even a tourist shuttle, formed a loose ring around Theta's pod. They had no weapons, but they had bodies, and they were willing to stand in the way. Back on Earth, people watched in silence. Millions held their breath. Governments scrambled. The United States, China, the European Union, India, all sent emergency commands to their nearest military ships. But instead of attacking, they were told to protect. For the first time, Earth's armies worked together not to fight but to guard. A fleet of human ships began to gather near Mars, moving slowly, carefully, like a wall of hope. The hunters saw this. Their logic broke. Why would so many risk themselves for one weak being? Why protect a dying ship? Their programming had no answer. They were built to hunt the weak, not face a wall of the willing. One hunter fired. A red beam shot out, but it missed the escape pod. It struck the Bright Star instead. The cargo ship shuddered, its hull cracking, but it did not explode. Lena Cho kept her ship steady. "We hold the line," she said over open comms. Her voice was calm. That act of courage broke the spell. On Earth, people began to chant. Not in anger, but in unity. "Let them live! Let them live!" The words spread like fire. Social media, news channels, radio waves, all carried the same message. Vance, still floating near the hunter, saw the human ships gathering. He smiled inside his helmet. He was running out of oxygen. His suit alarm beeped softly. 10 minutes of air left. But he didn't care. He had done what he came to do. He turned one last time to the hunters. He pointed at the growing wall of human ships, then at his own chest. "We remember," he whispered. The hunters did not attack again. They hovered, confused, their dark surfaces rippling like disturbed water. Their mission was clear: destroy the last of the impure. But now the impure were protected by thousands. And those thousands were not afraid. Theta's pod reached the safety of the human ring. A rescue team from the Mars station docked with it gently. Inside they found Theta barely alive but breathing. They wrapped it in thermal blankets and carried it to medical care. As they worked, one young medic looked at the alien's face and said, "You're safe now." Theta opened its eyes. It looked at the human hands helping it, and for the first time in years it felt hope. Back in space, Vance's oxygen warning turned red. 5 minutes left. He knew he wouldn't make it back to his ship, but he didn't try. He floated peacefully, watching the stars. Then a new voice came over his radio. It was the commander of the nearest Earth defense ship. "Vance, this is Captain Reyes. Hold on. We're coming to get you." But Vance shook his head even though no one could see. "No," he said softly. "Let me stay. Let them see what we're made of." He switched his radio to open broadcast, the same channel the whole solar system was listening to. "My name is Elias Vance," he said, his voice weak but clear. "I was nobody, just a broken pilot with a rusty ship. But today I stood with a friend from the stars. And I learned that we are not alone. We never were. So don't be afraid. Be kind, be brave. And remember, we are all connected." His voice faded. The oxygen ran out. His body went still, floating in the quiet dark, arms outstretched like he was hugging the universe. The hunters watched. Then slowly they turned away, not in defeat but in confusion. They had come to erase a memory. Instead, they had awakened it. And on Earth, millions of people looked up at the night sky, not with fear but with tears in their eyes, because one human had stood alone and reminded them all what it meant to be human.